not a conventional looking Yowie. It was just an animal, but it was a peculiar one that I've never seen before. I've never seen since.
What year was your encounter?
My guess it was probably during the 80s.
Could you just sort of talk me through what you were doing and exactly what happened?
Well, I was building a fire trail down through a valley and up the other side. It was actually northwest of Torrington, about 28 kilometres west of Deepwater, on the New England Highway between Glenminus and Tenterfield. 15 kilometres northwest of Quilpie Bay as the crow flies, I suppose. I could show you on a map, but anyway, I don't know.
Yeah.
I was making this fire trail with a bulldozer, and I'd progressed. There was actually a fork in the trail. I progressed a few kilometres down one direction, and my vehicle was up another leg of the trail, and I decided to knock off for lunch and walk back to my vehicle to have my lunch and reposition my vehicle closer to where I'd be at the end of the day. So I just took not necessarily a shortcut, but I guess it was sort of a shortcut along the creek because I hadn't been all the way along this particular creek. And I was just making my way just steadily along the creek. It had banks about 30 feet high, I suppose, and they were fairly steep. And the creek was only a fairly, slow trickle of water, I suppose you'd say. But I just sort of came face to face with this animal that had actually stood up on its four legs, and we must have seen each other almost the same time, I suppose. Might have been bent down just before I saw it, but it sort of stood up at about the same time as I saw it. And we only happened to be about 5 metres apart. And it gave me a tremendous fright. Hairs in the back of my neck stood out and all the rest. It was almost as tall as I was. And
how tall are you?
5'10" or something, I suppose. I imagine it was at least 4'6" anyway. And if anything, it was more bear-like than anything that I've seen before or since. But like it might have had there are some monkeys that have got a similar sort of nose, I suppose. But it was dark brown and it had long hair all over it. And one of the things I sort of remember is its legs were fairly plain looking. They didn't have much shape about them. They weren't curled like a dog's legs or a horse's legs. They didn't have much of a shape, and the hair on them was sort of fairly broad all the way down, or fairly long all the way down. It sort of hissed, a sort of hissy growl sort of at me, and I sort of froze. And then we sort of stared at one another for a few seconds. It was a bit hard to judge how long that was. But then it dropped down on 4 feet and sort of went across in front of me and climbed up the bank on all 4 legs up the hill. And I wasn't game to really move, I suppose, for a while. But after it went over the top of the bank where the country levelled out, I rather cautiously and slowly climbed up the hill and looked over the top, but saw no sign of it anymore. I wasn't game to search very diligently by myself that day, but I went straight home and got a couple of friends to come down to the area, and we searched. Remarkable things about it. The creek had a rather rocky bank, and it was rocky all the way along the creek. I never found any footprints that I could identify, because I looked for footprints, but I never found any. Anyway, I went back, which took me an hour or more to get home, and back with these other fellas probably 3 hours later. And we searched around that area, and we couldn't find the thing or any sign of it. I've never seen or heard of it since. Yeah, it was an odd animal that I've never seen or heard of before.
You were quite close to this animal. Can you sort of, in as much detail as you can, just sort of describe it from maybe top to bottom?
Long hair all over. It was fairly dark brown to black, the hair. I can still remember its face reasonably well. It was sort of cross between a bear and perhaps there's some types of apes, I forgot what type they are, that have a sort of a fairly broad, longish snout, like longer, straighter nose sort of thing, than, not a sort of a wrinkled up, pudgy nose, but a sort of a long one that sort of sticks out and down a bit.
Are you talking about almost a snout?
Bears have a similar sort of thing, I suppose a dog has too to a certain extent, but this was, fairly prominent nose that stuck out and down. But it was pretty hairy all over, even its face was fairly hairy.
In terms of the general shape of this thing, was it human-like or, in terms of its general frame?
Well, if you were covered with a great big hairy coat that, had long hair all over, I suppose you could say it was human-like, but its face wasn't human-like in any way. It was more a cross between a bear and one of those monkeys that have the long snouts. My bulldozer was the first motor that had ever gone into this valley, and it was a place where very few people ever get to.
Did you see arms and legs?
Yeah, it had arms and legs. And it stood up on its two rear legs in front of me, and we stared at each other. Froze to begin with. It sort of made the first move, I suppose. I can still remember I had a rusty old rickety pocket knife in my pocket. I reached for this pocket knife, but it was a scungy old knife that I used for scratching spark plugs and things like that. But I was very fearful all of a sudden because I'd never seen anything like it.
Was it a lean thing or a solid muscly thing, or?
It was fairly broad, I think, but it had all this long hair all over it, so it was a little bit hard to tell. I thought it was, probably as broad as I was anyway.
Was the hair smooth like a dog, or more shaggy like a goat, or something else?
It was fairly neat in that it was, all parallel and all fairly long. Like it wasn't combed or anything, but it was fairly neat all over. It just sort of naturally sort of spread out pretty evenly.
How long did it stand there before it moved off?
Oh, well, it felt like an eternity, but so it could have been 20 seconds or 30 seconds, I suppose. It sort of stood there sort of hissing and sort of swearing at me or something. A sort of a harsh hiss and sort of a kind of bit of a growl with the hiss.
And then it dropped to all fours to move off?
Yeah, it turned while it was still standing, and it wasn't very far to the edge of the creek where it sloped up. Like I even got more frightened because it actually moved, pretty square with me, or almost towards me a little bit, to get to where it wanted to climb the bank. And I suppose that created more fear in me, but it turned on its 2 feet, I suppose, and then dropped down and sort of climbed up the rocks up the side of the creek. The side of the creek was probably something like 45 degrees, a pretty steep slope, and you needed to, even humans needed to pull themselves up with bits of root and small trees and things and gripping the rocks to get up, or you probably could if you're real careful walk up upright, but it would have been difficult. But it went on all fours as it went up the hill. Many humans would have done the same, I suppose, as far as that goes. But it in no way reminded me of a human, though. I always thought it was much more like a bear than anything else. I've never seen a bear with such even, long hair. Most bears have got more shape to them, even their legs, they're thicker at the top and down at the bottom, and they're a bit more sleek in their hair and that sort of thing. When you think of American brown bears or something or other. But this had longer hair. Its legs were rather nondescript, not much shape about them, you know. They were just like a pair of baggy old overalls, but they were all made of hair or something. Still got no idea of any of your previous stories ever described something similar?
Yes, some of them definitely have. Can I push you just a little bit on the location? You mentioned the valley, but so we're talking in the Torrington area, but can you try to zero in a bit closer, or?
Yeah, just northwest of Torrington anyway. Only, like, to drive there is only 20 kilometres or so.
And this was a fairly remote valley, but you mentioned a name before that it was called?
Probably only about less than a kilometre from the junction of Blatherarm Creek and Qatar Creek.
Have you ever heard any other similar stories from that area, or since your experience?
Directly. I have heard that somebody else reported a similar sighting of a similar animal in that area, downstream, I suppose, within, like, he owned a property about a kilometre, or no, it might have been 2 kilometres further down where these two creeks join, and he came across an animal that seemed to be similar to what I described.